Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Fatem. I'm a senior software engineer working at Autodesk. In this video, I'm joined by my friend Jonathan, who went to the same university as I did, Cal State East Bay. Hi, John.
Hi, Fatema. Hi, Fatema's audience. I'm a software engineer working at Bloomberg, and yeah, here we are.
Yeah, like I mentioned, we both went to Cal State East Bay, except I got a bachelor's degree in computer science and Jonathan got a graduate degree of computer science. In this video, we're going to talk about our education at Cal State East Bay, more of a holistic point of view. We're just going to talk about really, now that it's been a while since we're out of school and we've been working, how was studying at Cal State East Bay and how was getting a degree from Cal State East Bay? Let's just talk about our jobs. I've already mentioned that I work at Autodesk and you've mentioned you work at Bloomberg. We're both software engineers, but we do very different things. That title, software engineer, it encompasses a lot of different variety of jobs, team structures, project structures. So why don't you start to tell us what type of software engineer you are?
Yes. So unlike you, who pushes buttons on the keyboard and talks to people all day, I push buttons on the keyboard and talk to people like all day. So,
Very important distinction.
so, but seriously though, I work on, let's see, I guess I should describe it as support for acquiring data for other engineering teams. So my clients are generally either engineering teams directly or people who care about the data but aren't technical people. And they'll come ask me to help them fix something or something like that.
Yeah. So what programming language or what sort of tech stack do you use at your job?
Let's see. So primarily Python, I would say. But we've got an app with a user interface on it. What should I say? Where it runs in the browser. It has TypeScript. So even though we're a completely internal team, we actually do get to use some JavaScript and TypeScript. Um, let's see. We also use technologies like Kafka, Spark. Um, I forget what else. Probably lots of good things.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'm part of an internal software team as well. I personally don't touch the products that Autodesk sells at all, but I do code entirely in Python. Our infrastructure is in AWS, and as a software engineer, my clients are very non-technical Autodesk employees. So they're also teams that are not experts in data handling, data processing, or anything software related, but they need the help. So in my daily job, I build AI-driven automation tools for people who work at Autodesk. I'm basically automating a bunch of really tedious and time-consuming things for them. I write my code entirely in Python, and then I hand it off to the front-end engineer who uses React to create a very nice website front end for my code.
so what you're saying is you use a lot of Python code and there's some React involved. Did I
So,
mention we use React?
yeah. I mean, honestly, all
We do a lot with
jobs
that.
sound somehow the same, yet in detail, they're not the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about our work mode. Are we remote? Are we hybrid? Are we in office specifically?
So I'm hybrid. I go in 3 days a week. Um, and I generally pick the days I work from home to be when I have an early morning meeting, because if I have to be somewhere at 8 a.m., I want that to be like 5 feet from my bed.
Yeah, I'm entirely remote, although we have offices in San Francisco and it is completely welcomed and totally cool to go into office if we want.
Mm.
Obviously, there are team hours and mandatory team-wide meetings that everyone is requested to fly out and fly in.
You have any
But
team outings and stuff like that? Is that more like the category of team meetings or?
so both team outings and team meetings, yeah. There are
Fair.
occasions basically that I would have to go into office, which is in San Francisco, but on a general, as a general rule, we're strictly remote.
Mm. Yeah, even I feel like it's nice to go into the office and see other people for, once in a while. Although I get that 3 times a week minimum.
So now let's get into switching from being a student to being a full-time employee. There are internships that kind of prepare you for the switch, kind of give you a little taste of what it means to be a 9 to 5 employee. But I have done 2 internships, and when I switched from being to a full-time employee, I felt like the internships were just like child's play. Like, this is having a full-time position is like every day 9 to 5. Like, if you couldn't wrap it up today, you have to come back tomorrow, and then the projects never end. It's just never ending work.
They
So
definitely give you the kitty gloves for the internships. Yeah. Let's see. I went to an internship before going to my master's. And that one, I actually did work pretty hard for that because I was kind of hoping to convert to a software engineer. Didn't work out. They had, I don't know, head count freeze or something. But it was for the best because then, we transferred into East Bay at the same time. So that's nice.
yeah, and we've been
And
friends ever since.
pretty much.
In terms of like being a student specifically though, like every time that we build a project together, you and I are pretty good friends. So that anytime there was a situation where I had to give my code to you so that you could either deploy it, or maybe you were the one working on the front end stuff, or vice versa, I was the one working on the front end stuff. We had a good relationship, and I didn't feel like collaborating with you was hard. But when I became a full-time employee, I had to, like I mentioned, I have to give my code off to the front-end engineer as well as the cloud engineers on our team so they could deploy it on AWS. So in the first 6 months of my job, the hardest thing for me was to give my code to someone, because I kept thinking, these are very senior software engineers. What if they look at my code and they say, what a dumbass? Who would do it this way?
You and your imposter syndrome. Yeah, I hear that. Like when I was an intern, my first job actually getting paid to do software, I definitely struggled like trying to give status updates to the senior engineers so I could explain what I was doing. Yeah, it was all just nerves and I'm new at this, therefore I must not be good at it kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. Another thing that really stressed me out about used to stress me out about project handovers, it was that I didn't fully understand how the AWS works. I didn't know what Lambda functions do, so I wasn't sure how to structure my code in the way that best uh I wanted to think about what it's like for the next person who takes over this project, but I didn't know what it is that I should do to help them. So I have a really deep understanding of the data. I know what my models are supposed to output. I know how the data is supposed to look on a front end, but I wasn't sure if the way I wrote my code is giving them what they need. And we ended up having a lot more touch bases and a lot more one-on-one meetings where I was verbally telling them, oh, this needs to do that, or like once this button is pushed, this needs to happen.
I get to handle the stuff I work on all the way to production roughly. Maybe one of my teammates will handle certain parts of the I guess pipeline. So that can happen, but I am at least roughly familiar with each of the steps, and I at least get the opportunity to do each of them. So that familiarity actually does help a great deal, because if you know what you need to do in React, you kind of know roughly what you'd like your API to be like on the other side. So if you're doing kind of both ends of that, then that helps a lot. It definitely is a challenge to decide what layer you want to put things in, because
Yes.
there's,
Layers, exactly. I didn't know the layers. I was thinking, this is Python. Do you want me to write it all in one script? Because that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you could say that again.
I did end up going over their code once they did deploy it. So I spent a lot of time studying up on their code, like literally mapping out, right, to build that understanding. So let's move on to the next topic. I think it's really interesting for people to know what was the first project that we built at Autodesk and at Bloomberg. I think I would give people more of an understanding of what do we do exactly.
Yeah. Why don't I go first? So my first project was actually a pre-training project. They stick you on a team to basically learn what it's like to work at Bloomberg. They give you like one project to kind of to chew on. They try not to give you more to bite off than you can chew, but anyway, we had a client that needed to give us data from a back end, and we needed to take that out and process it and put that in our error checker, basically. So I was given the project to figure out how to hit the API, and actually what API to use, because there were a few options, or seemed to be at first. Turned out there was really only one option that satisfied everybody's needs.
How typical.
Right?
Yeah.
That's actually kind of helpful, because then I don't have to choose anything. I just have to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And then I built the script that takes, well, first we have to scrape a user request to get what to use to hit the API. We hit the API. I integrate that output with our error checker, and bam, now we can check all of the things.
Wait, so is that just like a backend server that you built, or did it go behind a user interface too?
So our architecture is a little bit funky. It's kind of a script within a script, if that makes sense. It's the way our program was built, we have configuration driven stuff, and it worked with that. So there's a particular config that you fed it, fed the main program, I should say, and it would call that module, and then that would pull out the data that we need. And so in that config,
Nice.
I put in the users, or sorry, the client specific stuff. We're the users.
Mm-hmm.
The
Okay.
client doesn't use it directly.
Yeah, I get you. I can totally see a current student kind of not being able to understand what you're saying, but since I have been working, I totally see what you mean. And that's, I think, speaks to the importance of getting experience working in a real company, because these terms and this sort of like project structure is so different than what you would get as a coding assignment, which is
100%.
super laid out for you.
Coding assignments are A, laid out, and B, what do you
Yeah.
call them? Greenfield projects, where you decide everything, or even better, they give you a framework that's like really nicely laid out, like the end of our very first class together, actually.
Yeah,
But
Varick Erickson, CS201. He gave
yeah,
us the skeleton of a huge project,
fill
and
in the blanks,
only
kids.
asked, yeah, his only ask was fill in the blanks, and I was dying. So was the rest of the class. People were literally camping out in the library, trying to get anything to work. And meanwhile, you were like, do 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 do, I'm done. My first ever project, it was for a team of analysts, financial analysts at Autodesk. So in terms of team structure, the data source that they need to create reportings for leadership was very far removed from them. So they didn't have a way of conveniently logging in, fetching data. And even when they were delivered data by another team, it was not in the right shape for their reporting. So they had to use Excel to process this large amount of data, which took them a long time. And then once it came for creating outlooks for the long range outlooks of the next
the
5 years.
forecast, financial forecast.
Yeah. So
Nice.
for creating a forecast, let's the next 5 years, their accuracy was pretty low. So there was a lot of room for improvement. And that's fine, that serves its value, but they were looking to automate most of that process. And that's what my project was. So I had to sit down with them, understand first what's their current workflow, then architect something that would conveniently deliver data to them. And within that, I had to really learn about the internal system and databases at Autodesk, and figuring out which API can I connect with, how would that data be delivered to me, on what cadence, what's the delay of the data, and then all the way to cleaning up the data and making sure that I pick the correct model so that it has the best accuracy for the next 5 years. Ended up being a really tough project, And on top of all of that, it was just very, a lot of FaceTime with people that were much more senior than me, people that were working at Autodesk for 30 years. And I'm over
Nice.
here being like, let me build a software for you and I'll use AI. And they were like, okay, like you better not mess up. So
That's the thing. You better not
yeah,
mess up. If you get a D on a homework, like you can always make it up later. But if you mess up the graph thing for the big boss, he might not be happy with you. Give
yeah.
you one of those performance improvement things or whatever.
So now let's talk about, I want to basically rate our education at Cal State East Bay on a scale of 1 to 10. Sorry, no, a scale of 0 to 10.
0 being solidly average and 10 being solidly average, right?
No. 0 is like a community college with a computer science department that has one instructor. And that one instructor is not really good at teaching, but technically they can offer a class. And then 10 being a school that, you know, after graduating, you have offers for full-time employment just because you went to that school. Like you are ready to go into a job. That's my ideal school. I'm not saying 10 as in, ooh, I like somewhere like Stanford where it's just the name and the legacy of the place. I'm really thinking about it in terms of let's rate Cal State East Bay in terms of job readiness and how comfortable we are now in our job because of our education at Cal State East Bay.
I mean, obviously we can't give them all the credit for being awesome and getting great jobs. But
Yeah.
I would go with a solid 6 out of 10, which
Wow.
I guess is the 7th level out of 11 if you count 0. That's weird. That feels weird. Are we sure we want to go with 0 to 10? Can we go to 0 to 9? Then I can do
Okay. Yeah,
5.
make it
5 out of
science.
5 out of 9-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, they definitely have some great people there, like Erickson, like Chris Smith. Shout out to Dr. B too. It's what you get is relatively good versus what you pay because it's also pretty inexpensive, or I guess thoroughly subsidized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I'm gonna go with my rating too. So I'm gonna do, if we're doing 0 to 9, I'm gonna do a 4.5 because East Bay is successfully average, which is not a diss on the school. Given the education system of America, being average is a good thing. They don't charge you too much. The tuition is very affordable compared to the other schools in California, and they give you a CS degree, which is basically one of the most important aspects of finding a job. And like you mentioned, they have some professors who really care about making students ready for jobs. That's Dr. Greg Burstein, with his web development and web systems
Dr.
classes.
B, let's go.
Yeah. And you've also mentioned
Erickson.
Varick Erickson, who we talked about it, CS201, kicked our butt, almost died, but came out stronger from it. And then you have some teachers that really don't care, so they're happy to just teach out of the oldest, the most theoretical,
Most moldy.
irrelevant, computer science textbooks. They're just there, they just give their lectures and they walk away. But I want to talk about the how relaxed the education experience at Cal State East Bay is.
They didn't bury you in 40 hours of homework every week. I definitely, when I was going to UC Berkeley, they are much bigger on burying you in homework. Whereas in East Bay, they're like, okay, you probably can have a life outside of school. We'll just let you have that at least. So that helped.
Yeah. Also, the admission requirements for East Bay, pretty relaxed, It's it's not like San Jose State University where their requirements to get admitted to their computer science department is almost as difficult as getting into a UC, let's say UC Santa Barbara. They have a pretty good computer science program.
I feel like those admission requirements are partly just based on how many people want to go there. Like they just have to keep upping it until like they don't have to reject quite as many people or something like that.
Yeah, at East Bay, I think they're pretty forgiving. They give conditional acceptance to many people. And conditional acceptance for transfer students, that means, or even graduate students, it means that if you don't 100% meet their admission requirements, they're willing to give you the opportunity to work on some of them. For example, passing some prerequisite units or passing some lower division units on their campus. And that's, you know, they don't charge you a lot of money, and yet they're willing to give you the opportunity to get a computer science degree, which is not bad.
Mm,
In terms of UC systems, I have so many friends from community college who went into the UC schools because they thought that if they go to a CSU, their life is for sure ruined. There's no way they're going to find employment at all. So one of my most nervous decisions ever was saying, I'll just go to Cal State East Bay and I'll make the best out of it, which turned out to be good for me.
mm,
So in terms of the UCs, a lot of transfer students go on the academic probation list
mm,
within the first quarter, just because the classes are so much bigger and the curriculum of classes are so difficult that barely getting a C is basically the norm. And that really traumatizes people, because not only were you a very high achieving community college student, but then you went into your dream school, quote unquote, and then you barely got a C, and then matter of fact you
mhm.
got placed on an academic probation list. So in the next semesters, a lot of people who went to UCs, either they completely switched their major, whatever their intended major was. I know some people who went into computer science, some other people who went into biology and whatever other science. So either they switched their major because they said, I cannot fail
Mm.
in this class. Like it was more important for them to get a degree from that school
In
versus
something,
getting,
in
yeah, in
anything.
something. Yeah. And in the next quarters, they ended up having to pay for very easy classes that would help them keep their GPA up, instead of paying for classes that would help them get ready for their job, for their future job,
Mm,
which sucks, you know? So that's a lot of mental pressure that I would really take into account when I'm talking about East Bay and saying it's a 4.5. It's not a diss. It's good that it's a 4.5. It's relaxed and it doesn't crush your soul and doesn't make you suicidal and depressed.
100%. Yeah. It was, I can't imagine going back to Berkeley with kids. That would be just too much. That would not work out. I basically didn't have a life when I went there, which was fine at the time because you know, I like staying home and playing video games. But, you know, I'm a big kid now, and now
Yeah.
it's nice to go out sometimes.
Yeah, some of the downsides of East Bay, though, I wouldn't say East Bay is like an 8 out of 10. You know, I'm keeping the score low on purpose as well, just because in terms of internships, getting help to land internships, East Bay does nothing for you.
They're
That's
kind of
where
overlooked by the companies too. Like, who was it?
very,
Twitter visited a different department and you kind of went along for the ride or something.
oh my, this is the most embarrassing story. So Twitter at the time came into Cal State East Bay, not for their computer science or engineering department. No, no, no. They were there for the communication department because East Bay has a very good English and communication and business schools, whatever. So I kind of found out about the Twitter event and I said, oh, are you hiring software engineer interns? And they were like, we guess, but we were here for another purpose. But
Nice.
the point is that, yeah, East Bay doesn't have a lot of companies that have a working relationship with the school.
Yeah.
Whereas UC Davis, where, you know, or UC Santa Barbara or UC Berkeley, they have very elaborate, dedicated recruiting events on their campus all the time.
Yeah, we had job fairs, but it was like, you know, 20 people showed up with some nice poster boards, and you never heard of any of the companies.
Now, Workday did actually do something when we were at Cal State East Bay. They did a tour for select few computer science students, and their intention was to familiarize us with their company and then later on convert us either to interns or full-time employees. But other than that, you know, we didn't really, not, there was nothing. There's no help from East Bay's computer science
Mm-hmm.
department. So That's where you can say it in a negative way, where you can say you get what you pay for. You're not
Yeah,
paying a lot, so you're not getting a lot out of it in that sense.
yeah, yeah. Um, but you still got at the end of the day, you still have that piece of paper you can show to recruiters and be like, look, I spent X years at school, therefore you can believe that I know some things and actually like this job career.
It's really interesting that at East Bay, we're saying they don't offer any help for internships. They have some good things and bad things, but then that's everyone's point of view of their school. I've met people who went to UC Davis and UC Berkeley, even some people who went to MIT, and they still criticize their computer science department, saying they didn't help us get prepared for internships. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an issue with CS in general because I mean, if you really think about it, if you remember from some of our theory classes, it basically came out of math PhD's homework. He was doing some homework. Well, it was like his thesis. But anyway, he was doing his freaking math homework and he was like, well, what if we do this, blah, blah, blah. And now we have Turing machines. And then somebody was like, wait a minute. We pay people to compute things. We have these very expensive computers that are very slow and error prone. But what if, and somebody invented the transistor and a whole bunch of fun things happened. Like it's very theory focused rather than maybe I should say practical. It's less focused on practical matters. Like how many classes do you have on agile development or
Right.
reviewing a PR
Yeah.
or I don't know, talking with clients.
Just find it funny that people who went to, let's say, Purdue University and UC Berkeley, they sit there and they talk about, oh, I wasn't able to land any internships. I had to hustle my way through finding internships, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, do you even know what Cal City Space is like? So it's like a confusion.
Never mentioned to like build a little personal project and
Never.
show off that you know what a decorator is or something. Like
Mm-hmm.
they don't mention it.
Yeah. So now compare that to wherever privileged, amazing school you come from. So it's like
Guess
I
what? They
just
still don't tell you to figure out what a decorator is and put it in a personal project.
it's just I don't know, like I'm trying to say that Cal State East Bay has its benefits, but at the same time, it's extremely average. And
Mm,
it's interesting that other people criticize their schools, but then when
even
I
if it's prestigious,
actually,
right?
what's
Mhm.
that?
Even if it's prestigious, right? Or
Even
relatively.
if it's prestigious, especially if it's prestigious, because I find that a lot of people they talk about, oh, I went into this whatever school and I had pretty big expectations, but then I realized I have to do a lot of the legwork for finding internships and getting myself prepared for full-time interviews and finding a full-time position, you know?
Yeah, it's not like graduating elementary school and boom, now you're in middle school. You actually have to
Yeah.
like try to get people to give you money for your work. What's up with
Mhm.
that?
Yeah. So on some level, everyone has to go through that, but it's just that at East Bay, like the career fairs are atrocious. It's just so bad.
Mm, yeah, I feel like this is a problem with all schools. Yeah, all schools. Maybe not the boot camp so much. Maybe not some private schools. I don't know, but like all the public schools, probably most universities, maybe all of them.
Hmm.
But they could definitely do better with the job fair. And
Yeah.
definitely, I think that's primarily your point earlier about making relationships with companies.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard people who say, "Oh, there was Google at our job fairs. They were there every semester or every quarter." But the lines for Google was so long, or the lines for Microsoft was so long, you could barely talk to a recruiter. And I'm over here being like, "Google showed up to your school?
You could wave at them? Really? You
You
didn't even have to leave campus? What are you
they
complaining about?
right? You didn't have to leave campus and they were there." And some other good things about East Bay, the location is great. being close to South Bay and just Silicon Valley in general, John and I, we were able to go to so many conferences and
Mm.
hackathons and tech events, which is where we actually did the networking and talking to recruiters. So it was like almost as if, well, if let's say
It's
Microsoft.
almost as if the school being laid out is a huge bonus because you have more time for hackathons and stuff.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Why don't you
Dun
elaborate
dun
on that?
dun.
Yeah, talk
Should
more
we
about
add a
that.
point to the rating of the school now?
Well, let's first I know exactly what you mean, but let's clarify it for the current students. Like, what are you saying?
Okay. So essentially, if you're not spending 40 hours a week doing homework and 20 hours a week in school and the rest of the hours of the week trying to catch up on your sleep and or eating and or hygiene, like you can actually go places and do things, and some of those things might be happening at places where they have conventions
Mhm.
with lots of recruiters, people who are actually in the profession that you'd like to join after graduation. And it's definitely great to expose yourself to those those events and those people.
Yeah. This is going back to us saying being a student at Cal State East Bay is very relaxed. You don't have the mental pressure from the university, which leaves you a lot of time to go and venture out. There's so many tech conferences and tech events where there's just so much resources that you could tap into. I have a video about tech conferences because that's where I got most of my networking done. And that's where I would go up to software engineers and ask them, how can I prepare myself for internships? And that was the most productive thing I did for myself, honestly.
Link in the
So
somewhere to that
yeah, link
video.
to that video. Yeah. So being a student at Cal State East Bay gives you the time to venture out and not be sort of chained to your campus. You can go off and have an individual life, plus do take advantage of all the resources that are just part of Silicon Valley. You know, you're not going to school in the middle of, let's say, Indiana, where there's nothing there. We're close to a tech hub. So that becomes a huge plus for Cal State East Bay.
100%. Yeah. Um, what's that thing about real estate? Location, location, location.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's, I think that's what's been giving East Bay a lot of its students anyway, you know,
100%. It's the people that are in the area that couldn't get into San Jose or Berkeley or wherever.
or couldn't afford to, or didn't want to go through that long list of admissions.
Yeah.
It's generally, to close out this section, I think being a computer science student is a blessing. There's so much online resources that it almost doesn't matter where you go to school. It's just what you make of it.
100%.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Moving on. So let's close this out. I think this is a good conversation, a really good catch up for us a year and a half after our previous video. We've talked about our perspective on East Bay, looking at it in terms of how prepared we are for our jobs and what it gave us, what it didn't give us. And we also told you what we do at our jobs. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love chatting with students, but leave your comments on this video as well. Would love to hear from other alumni of Cal State East Bay, or even if you got your degree from another school, tell us everything that sucked about your school and things that were great about your education. Anything from you, John?
Looks good to me, Bridget.